Welcome back to the Acceptance Project podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bryan Gross. Now today I want you to do something with me. I want you to rewind the clock a bit. I know, we just set the clock forward a few weeks ago, but today we're going to rewind it back several years. Maybe back to a living room floor, sitting cross-legged, watching a little red-headed girl with a voice bigger than her circumstances. Yep, that's it. You guessed it. We're heading down a little musical memory lane with Annie. You may be wondering, what life advice can we get from a kid who sings about tomorrow and hangs out with a billionaire? Well, some of the simplest stories carry the deepest truths, and somehow Annie managed to sneak a whole philosophy of resilience into a few catchy songs and a lot of optimism. It just so happened that when I sat down in my office a few mornings ago to begin working on a podcast for today, I looked out my window and, as usual, it was gloomy. The Pacific Northwest skies were gray and the clouds seemed to be on the edge of bursting and pouring buckets of rain. I reminded myself that the forecast said tomorrow, which was the next day, it is supposed to be an unusually warm day for the Pacific Northwest and lots of sunshine. I laughed and thought about that silly song Annie always sang, and then when I turned my computer on, there it was. April 21st marks 49 years ago since Annie debuted on Broadway. But her story began over a century ago, in the 1800s as a poem, later became a comic strip, and then made its way to Broadway before hitting the big screen. Her story has lasted for generations, and she's still out here reminding grown adults how to get through hard days without throwing in the towel. Because underneath the songs and the storyline, Annie is really about something bigger. Hope, resilience, and the quiet belief that your story is not over yet. So today, let's explore a few things Annie taught us that still matter, even now, and especially now. Annie didn't always have evidence that things would get better. She had belief. That famous line, "the sun will come out tomorrow," isn't about predicting the weather. It's about not allowing today have the final word. As adults, we get practical, we get cautious. We start saying things like, well, let's be realistic. But sometimes realistic becomes a disguise for giving up early. Annie reminds us that hope is not denial, it's fuel. It's what keeps you moving when nothing around you suggests you should. I'll tell you another time in history where we learned to keep hope alive. If anyone talked about hope, it was Dr. Martin Luther King. He didn't just talk about hope, he embodied it. In a time when there were very few reasons to believe things would change, his "I Have a Dream" speech is hope in action, not soft, wishful thinking, but steady, determined belief paired with courage. Annie says the sun will come out tomorrow. Dr. King said, "I have a dream." Different stages, same heartbeat. Both are about holding on to a vision of something better when the present moment doesn't reflect it yet. Annie believed in tomorrow, and Dr. King believed in a future he couldn't yet see. And both remind us of something we forget as adults. Hope is not about what is, it's about what could be, and choosing to believe it anyway. You see, there's something kind of incredible when you put Annie and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. side by side for a second. Annie is standing there singing about tomorrow like she already knows it's coming, and Dr. King is standing in front of the world saying, "I have a dream," before that dream ever even had a chance to show up. Different situations, different stakes, but the same idea running underneath both of them. They chose to believe in something better before they had any real proof that it was already on its way. And I think that's what makes this hit a little differently for us as adults. Annie shows us that hope can be simple. It can be quiet. It can be something you hold on to on the days when everything else feels a little off. Dr. King shows us that hope can also be bold. It can be something you say out loud, even when people aren't ready to hear it. One sings it, one declares it, but they're both doing the same thing. They're not ignoring reality. They're just refusing to let it have the final word. So maybe that's the takeaway for us. Somewhere between a song about tomorrow and a dream spoken into history, we get this reminder that hope isn't just something you feel when things aren't going well. It's something you choose. You choose it when things are uncertain. You choose it when things are hard. And honestly, those are the moments when it matters the most. Now, Annie was an orphan, living in a rough environment, surrounded by people who underestimated her. That could have been her entire story, but Annie never introduced herself as her situation. She showed up as her spirit. And somewhere along the way, as adults, we start doing the opposite. We define ourselves by our job title, our past, our mistakes, our labels. Annie reminds us that where you start is not who you are, and who you are is still being written. Think about Forrest Gump for a second. Here's someone who was told from the very beginning that he didn't quite fit, that he wouldn't keep up, and that he probably wouldn't amount to much. And yet, he never spent his time trying to prove people wrong. He didn't reshape himself to meet expectations. He just showed up as himself, honest, kind, and consistent. He kept moving forward, one step at a time, without apology for who he was. Now put that next to Annie. Different story, different struggle, but the same kind of strength. She doesn't wait for life to get easier before she believes in it. She stands right in the middle of uncertainty and still chooses hope. She sings about tomorrow like it's already on its way, even when today gives her every reason to doubt it. And when you place those two side by side, something clicks. Annie shows us how to believe before we see it. Forrest shows us how to be ourselves without apology. And when you bring those together, you get something powerful. Hope gives you courage to keep going, and authenticity gives you the freedom to keep going as you. That's where acceptance begins, not in waiting for the world to understand you, but in deciding you're not going to shrink while you wait. And that is the heart of bridging success. Acceptance, courage, hope, and resilience aren't just ideas we talk about. They're things we practice, things we build into the way we show up for ourselves and for each other. And the Acceptance Project podcast is where we bring those conversations to life every single week. It's where we take stories like Annie and Forrest, stories that stick with us, and use them as reminders that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have it all figured out, and you don't have to become someone else to belong. Because at the end of the day, this is what we're striving for: a world where people don't feel like they have to hide, shrink, or explain their way into acceptance. A world where hope is something we hold on to, courage is something we practice, and resilience is something we build together. And if you're listening to this right now, you're already a part of that. At first glance, Annie is about independence. She's scrappy, resourceful, and determined. But look closer. Her life changes through connection. Someone sees her, listens to her, believes in her, and that shift changes everything. As adults, we often try to carry everything alone like we're in some one person survival contest. But the truth is, people don't heal in isolation, they heal in connection. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not fix someone's life, but simply show up in it. And you can see that in someone like Fred Rogers. Mr. Rogers didn't just create a television show, he created a space where people felt seen, especially children who were often overlooked or misunderstood. But here's what's powerful: his impact wasn't built on standing alone, it was built on connection. The way he slowed down and spoke directly to people, the way he made eye contact through a screen like you were the only person in the room, the way he reminded every single viewer, "I like you just the way you are." That message didn't just comfort people in the moment, it planted something deeper. It gave people permission to accept themselves in a world that constantly tells them to be something else. And the ripple effect of that kind of connection is still happening today. Think about that for a second. Generations of people grew up feeling just a little more understood, a little more accepted, and a little less alone because one person chose to show up with intention and care. And those same people carried that forward into their classrooms, their families, their workplaces, and their communities. That's how connection works. It doesn't stop with one moment, it spreads. That's what connection does. It multiplies, it reaches further than we think. It reminds us that sometimes success isn't about standing above others, it's about standing with them. And in a world where it's easy to feel unseen, one moment of genuine connection can shift everything. It can change how someone sees themselves, and it can give them courage to keep going. It can remind them that they matter. And sometimes That's all it takes to completely change the direction of life. It's funny, isn't it? A story written over a century ago, a musical from the 70s, a character with wild hair and bigger dreams, still has something to teach us. Not because life is easy, but because even in the middle of hard, there is still room for hope, identity, and connection. And maybe that's the real message Annie leaves with us. Not that everything magically works out, but that we don't stop showing up while we're waiting for things to change. Because let's be honest for a second. Sometimes life doesn't turn out the way we hoped it would. Sometimes those bumps in the road don't just slow us down, they send us tumbling over the handlebars and straight onto the ground with a hard thud. In those moments, it would be so easy to just sit there and say, I'm done. I can't do this. We've all had those days. The ones where trying one more time feels like just too much. The ones where stepping outside your comfort zone feels like stepping off a cliff. And I'll tell you something. I've got a little sign in my office, nothing fancy, just something small sitting on a shelf behind me. But it has this way of showing up right when I need it most. On those days when fear starts getting loud or when doubt starts creeping in, when I start telling myself maybe it's just better not to try again, I'll catch a glimpse of it out of the corner of my eye. And it says this: sometimes life says, what if I fall? But hope says, what if you fly? I need that reminder way more than I ever care to admit, because falling feels real. It feels immediate. But hope, well, hope asks a different question. It reminds us that maybe the story isn't over yet, that maybe, just maybe, the next step isn't where you fall, it's where you rise. If something in this episode hit home for you, don't keep it to yourself. Go ahead and share it with someone. You probably already have a name in mind, someone who could use that reminder right now. And while you're there, take a second to like, rate, and follow the podcast. It helps more people find these conversations and keeps this community growing. I'd also really love to hear from you. Send me an email at info@bridgingsuccess.com and tell me what you think, your thoughts, your reactions, your ideas, all of it. Your opinion doesn't have to agree with mine. Your voice is welcome here no matter what, because your voice matters here. This is a space where your story, your opinion, and your experiences are welcome. And if you share your story with us, there's a good chance we may feature it in a future episode. And if we do, we'll send you some Bridging Success swag, maybe like a t-shirt, a mug, or whatever else I can find lying around my office I think you might like, just as a way of saying thank you for being part of this and for helping others feel a little less alone. And don't worry, your name won't be shared on the podcast if you prefer not to be. So reach out, share it, be part of it, because this isn't just a podcast you listen to, it's a conversation you're a part of. And just remember, hope is not childish. Your past is not your definition, and you were never meant to do this alone. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is believe in tomorrow, even when today is doing everything it can to convince you otherwise. So until next time, take care of yourself and take care of those around you. The Acceptance Project podcast is a production of Bridging Success, LLC. To learn more about the podcast and our work, please visit bridgingsuccess.com. This podcast and its contents are for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. I'm Dr. Bryan Gross, but I'm not a licensed therapist. The topics and opinions shared by me and any guests are our own and should not replace professional or medical advice. If you're seeking mental health support, medical guidance, or help with personal matters, please reach out to a licensed professional who can provide the individual support you need.